Obo was always a quiet boy, not like the other children in his neighborhood. While they played and laughed in the open fields or chased each other through the village streets, Obo preferred to be alone, wandering in places others avoided. From a young age, he had a strange fascination with death. The sight of funerals and graves didn't scare him like it did others. In fact, he was curious. What happened when life ended? Where did people go? This curiosity only grew as Obo got older. By the time Obo was 16, his fascination had turned into something darker. He often visited the cemetery, spending hours there, watching as people came to bury their loved ones. He didn't mourn with them, he simply watched, observing the stillness that surrounded death. It was as if the silence of the grave called to him, pulling him closer each time. One day, Obo heard about a job opening at the local morgue. It wasn't a place most people wanted to work, but for Obo, it seemed perfect. He applied, got the job, and soon found himself spending more time with the dead than the living. Working at the morgue was everything Obo had imagined. The cold, quiet rooms where the dead were kept felt like home to him. He moved bodies, cleaned the floors, and made sure everything was in order. But as time went on, Obo's curiosity about death grew even stronger. The more time he spent around the bodies, the more he felt drawn to them in a way he couldn't explain. One night, after everyone else had gone home, Obo found himself alone in the morgue. There was a new body, a young woman who had died in a tragic accident. Her lifeless form lay on the steel table, covered with a white sheet. Obo stared at her for what felt like hours, unable to move. Without thinking, he reached out and touched her cold hand. The feel of her skin under his fingers sent a strange thrill through him. Obo pulled back, his heart racing. He knew what he was feeling wasn't normal, but he couldn't stop himself. The next thing he knew, he was lying down next to the body, closing his eyes and letting the coldness of her still form wash over him. It was as if he had found peace. That night, Obo slept beside the body, and when he woke up, he felt something he hadn't felt before, a sense of belonging. After that night, Obo's strange behavior became a secret part of his life. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had done. It wasn't long before he repeated it with other bodies that came into the morgue. Each time, he waited until everyone had left. Then he would lie down next to the body, feeling the cold stillness, the closeness of death. But Obo didn't keep his secret to himself for long. He had a close friend named Kofi who shared his strange fascination with death. Kofi had always been a bit of an outsider, just like Obo. They had grown up together, and Kofi knew about Obo's interest in the cemetery and funerals. One day, Obo decided to tell him the full truth. "Kofi," Obo whispered as they sat together one evening, far from where anyone could hear them. "There's something I've been doing. Something I haven't told anyone." Kofi's eyes lit up with curiosity. "What is it?" Obo hesitated, but then he told him everything. He told Kofi about the nights he had spent at the morgue, lying next to the bodies. To his surprise, Kofi didn't look shocked. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if he understood. "I've always wanted to be close to death, too," Kofi admitted. "There's something about it. Something that draws me in." From that moment on, Obo and Kofi shared their secret. Obo invited Kofi to join him at the morgue one night, and Kofi agreed. They were bound by their strange obsession, and together they planned to do what Obo had been doing alone for so long. The night Kofi joined Obo at the morgue, the air was thick with anticipation. The two boys snuck into the building after hours, their hearts pounding with excitement and fear. Two new bodies had arrived earlier that day. One was an elderly man, the other a young woman who had died in childbirth. They lay side by side on cold steel tables, covered by white sheets. Obo and Kofi stood in the dimly lit room, staring at the bodies in silence. Then, without a word, Obo moved toward the young woman's body. He pulled back the sheet, revealing her still form. Kofi followed his lead, doing the same with the elderly man. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, as if in a trance, they both lay down next to the bodies, feeling the cold, lifeless flesh against their skin. The stillness of the room was suffocating, but neither of them felt fear. Instead, they felt a strange connection, as if they were part of something larger than themselves. But as the night wore on, their actions grew more disturbing. The line between curiosity and madness blurred, and what had started as simple fascination turned into something darker. The boys did things to the bodies that they would never speak of again, things that made them question their own humanity. Despite his strange fascination with death, Obo was still a teenage boy, and like any boy, he could fall in love. That's exactly what happened when he saw Yemi for the first time. She was everything Obo wasn't. Bright, full of life, always surrounded by friends. From the moment he saw her, he knew he wanted to be with her. For weeks, Obo watched Yemi from a distance, never having the courage to talk to her. He admired her kindness, her laugh, and the way she seemed to light up every room she entered. But Obo didn't know how to approach someone like her. She was popular, and he was the strange, quiet boy who worked at the morgue. One day, Obo finally decided to approach her. He saw her sitting alone under a tree, reading a book, and he knew this was his chance. His heart pounded as he walked over to her. "Yemi," he said quietly, "I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time." Looked up from her book and smiled. "Hi, Obo, what's up?" Obo hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I like you, Yemi. I've liked you for a while now, and I was wondering if you'd like to go out with me." Smile faded. She looked uncomfortable. "Obo, that's really sweet, but I'm not looking for a relationship right now. I'm sorry." Obo felt his heart sink. He forced a smile and nodded. "It's okay. I understand." But he didn't understand. He couldn't understand why she didn't feel the same way. As he walked away, the rejection gnawed at him, fueling his obsession even more. Yemi was alive, and she had rejected him. The dead, on the other hand, couldn't say no. A few weeks after Yemi's rejection, tragedy struck. It had been an ordinary day for Yemi. The sun was shining, and the gentle breeze of the afternoon swept through the small house where she lived with her family. After finishing her classes for the day, she returned home, humming a soft tune as she set about her chores. Yemi enjoyed helping her mother keep the house tidy, and today was no different. She began by dusting the shelves and sweeping the floor, moving from room to room with a calm, easy rhythm. As she worked, her mind wandered to her future, her dreams, her friends, and even the boy from school, Obo, who had asked her out not too long ago. She had thought about him since then, wondering if she had been too quick to reject him. He seemed nice, if a bit quiet. But she had more important things on her mind. School, her family, her plans for the future. After cleaning for nearly an hour, Yemi moved to the kitchen to help her mother prepare dinner. She was in the middle of wiping down the countertops when she suddenly felt a strange dizziness. The world around her began to spin, and her vision blurred. She reached out to steady herself on the counter, but her hands felt weak. Before she could call out for help, her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. Her mother, who had been busy preparing vegetables at the sink, rushed over to her, panic filling her heart. "Yemi," she cried, kneeling beside her daughter. "Yemi, can you hear me?" But Yemi didn't respond. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow. Her mother frantically called for her husband, who came running from the next room. Within minutes, Yemi was rushed to the nearest hospital, where doctors immediately began working to figure out what had caused her sudden collapse. At the hospital, Yemi's family waited anxiously for news. The doctors examined her thoroughly, running several tests to determine what was wrong. After hours of waiting, they were finally given an answer. Yemi had suffered a severe brain hemorrhage. The doctors explained that it was an unexpected and sudden event, one that no one could have predicted. "She's in a coma," the doctor told them gravely. "We'll do everything we can, but it's hard to say how long she'll remain unconscious. There's a chance she could wake up, but we just don't know." Yemi's parents were devastated. The vibrant, lively girl they had known was now lying motionless in a hospital bed, her body hooked up to machines that kept her alive. Days turned into weeks as Yemi remained in the coma, showing no signs of improvement. Her friends came to visit, sitting by her bedside, hoping that their presence might somehow wake her. They whispered to her, telling her stories, sharing memories, and begging her to come back. But Yemi didn't respond. Obo heard the news through a mutual friend. When he learned that Yemi was in the hospital, his heart sank. He couldn't believe it. The girl who had been full of life and energy, the girl he had admired from afar, was now lying in a hospital bed, hovering between life and death. He wanted to visit her, to be close to her, but he didn't. He stayed away, unsure of what to say or do. 2 weeks passed, and the doctors saw no improvement. Yemi's condition remained unchanged, and her family was forced to face a heartbreaking decision. The doctors sat down with them, explaining that there was little more they could do. Yemi's brain had suffered too much damage, and the chances of her ever waking up were slim to none. "We're so sorry," the doctor said softly, "but it might be time to consider letting her go." With heavy hearts, Yemi's parents made the painful decision to remove her from life support. The machines that had kept her breathing were turned off, and within moments, Yemi was pronounced dead. The news of Yemi's death spread quickly through the community. Everyone who knew her was shocked and saddened. She had been so young, so full of promise. No one could believe that she was truly gone. But for Obo, the news affected him in a much deeper, darker way. He couldn't stop thinking about her smile, her kindness, and the way she had looked at him when he asked her out. Her rejection still lingered in his mind, but now there was no chance for her to ever change it. Yemi was gone, but Obo knew exactly where her body would be taken. Yemi's body was transferred to the morgue a few days after her passing. The funeral arrangements were being made, but her family needed time to prepare for the ceremony, so her body would rest at the morgue until then. Obo knew this all too well. As soon as he heard the news, he felt an overwhelming pull to see her one last time. It was strange. Despite her death, Obo didn't feel sadness like everyone else. Instead, he felt an odd mix of excitement and longing. He couldn't stop thinking about the fact that she was now lying in the cold room, where he worked, where he had spent so many nights alone with the dead. But Yemi was different. This was the girl he had loved, the one he had dreamed of. Now she was there, waiting for him, still and silent. Obo waited for the right moment, biding his time until the morgue was empty. He made sure that no one would be around that night. When the last worker left, he slowly made his way to the cold room where Yemi's body was kept. His heart pounded in his chest as he walked down the dimly lit hallway, his footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. When he reached the room, he paused for a moment outside the door, his hand resting on the handle. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the mixture of fear and excitement that rushed through him. Then, with a steady hand, he pushed the door open. The cold air of the room hit him immediately, and there, on the steel table in the middle of the room, was Yemi. She was covered with a white sheet, just like all the others. But this time, it felt different. This wasn't just another body. This was Yemi. Obo walked slowly toward the table, his eyes fixed on her still form. He gently pulled back the sheet, revealing her face. She looked peaceful, as if she were simply sleeping. Her skin was pale, but to Obo she still looked beautiful. He reached out, hesitating for a moment before his fingers brushed against her cold cheek. The touch sent a shiver down his spine. He stood there for what felt like hours, just looking at her, memorizing every detail of her face. Then, as if in a trance, he moved closer. He lay down beside her, just as he had done with the other bodies before. But this time it felt different. This was Yemi, the girl he had loved. She was close now, closer than she had ever been when she was alive. Obo closed his eyes, feeling the coldness of her body against his. His heart raced, but his mind was calm. This was what he had wanted for so long, Yemi beside him, not able to reject him this time. But as Obo lay there, something strange began to happen. At first he thought he was imagining it. A slight movement, a twitch in her fingers. He opened his eyes, staring at her hand. Then it happened again, a small, jerking motion. Obo's breath caught in his throat. Yemi's body moved. Obo scrambled off the table, his heart pounding in his chest. He backed away, his eyes wide with disbelief. Yemi's hand twitched again, this time more violently. Her chest heaved as if she were struggling to breathe, though her mouth remained closed. Her eyelids fluttered, and then slowly they opened. Obo stood beside Yemi's lifeless body, his mind struggling to process everything. He tried to push away the memory of her hand twitching earlier, focusing instead on the fact that she was his now. She was no longer someone he could only dream about. Yemi was there with him, even in death. As he leaned closer to her, his phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Kofi. "Heard about Yemi. I'm coming over. We'll do this together." Obo froze. He and Kofi had always done everything together when it came to their dark secret at the morgue. Kofi was the only one who knew what Obo had been doing all this time, and normally Obo wouldn't hesitate to let him come. But this time was different. This was Yemi. She wasn't just another corpse. She had been the girl he loved, and he wasn't going to share her. Obo stepped outside the cold room to call Kofi. The night air felt heavy as he tried to steady his breath. He told Kofi not to come, that he wouldn't let him touch Yemi. Kofi didn't understand why Obo was suddenly acting differently. They had shared this dark obsession for years, and now Obo wanted to keep Yemi all to himself. The conversation grew tense, with Kofi reminding Obo that Yemi was dead and that they had always shared every body before. But Obo stood firm, telling Kofi that Yemi was his, and he wouldn't let him near her. After a brief cold exchange, Kofi hung up, frustrated. Obo stood there for a moment, his hands shaking. He couldn't let anyone else near Yemi, especially not Kofi. She was different. He was convinced of that. He felt an odd sense of possession, mixed with the memory of his unrequited love for her when she was alive. He took a deep breath, pocketed his phone, and headed back into the cold room to be with Yemi again. But when he opened the door, something was wrong. The steel table was empty. The white sheet that had covered her body was crumpled on the floor. Obo's heart raced. Yemi was gone. His mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. He had only been outside for a few minutes. No one else had come in. The morgue was locked, and there was no way anyone could have moved her so quickly. Panic set in as Obo searched the room, checking every corner, lifting sheets from the other bodies, hoping somehow he had just made a mistake. But Yemi wasn't there. He searched the entire morgue, opening drawers, looking for any sign of her. But she had vanished. His heart pounded in his chest as he ran from room to room, desperate to find her. His hands shook uncontrollably as he lifted the other sheets again and again. But nothing. Yemi was simply gone. The fear grew deeper inside him. He couldn't understand it. How could a body just disappear? His mind flashed back to the moment he saw her hand twitch, and suddenly an icy dread filled him. Was it possible that Yemi had moved on her own? But that was impossible. She had been dead for days. Still, the image of her lifeless hand twitching replayed in his mind, sending shivers down his spine. Obo stumbled out of the morgue into the night. The cold air hit his face as he tried to calm himself, but it was no use. He was consumed by fear and confusion. Yemi's body was gone, and he had no explanation for it. He walked in a daze, the streets feeling strange and unfamiliar, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. The thought of Yemi waking up, of her leaving the morgue on her own, gnawed at him, but it was too terrifying to fully comprehend. By the time he made it home, he was drenched in sweat, his hands still trembling. Locking the door behind him, Obo collapsed onto his bed. His mind refused to settle, replaying every moment over and over again. The morgue, Yemi's twitching hand, the empty table, none of it made sense. Yemi was gone, and Obo had no idea where she could be. What Obo didn't know was that the moment he stepped outside to take Kofi's call, something unthinkable had happened. Yemi, who had been dead for days, stirred on the cold steel table. Her body, stiff and motionless just moments before, twitched violently, as if something deep within her was fighting to break free. Slowly, and with a great struggle, Yemi rolled off the table, landing on the hard floor with a dull thud. It was as if her body was moving on its own, driven by some unseen force. Her legs were weak, barely able to support her as she dragged herself toward the back door of the morgue. Her mind was a haze, caught between the worlds of life and death, but something inside her pushed her to keep going. She didn't know where she was going or why, but she knew she had to get out. Reaching the back door, Yemi used the last bit of strength she had to push it open and crawl outside. The cold night air hit her like a wave, but she kept moving, inching her way toward the main road. Her vision blurred, her body still numb from the icy grip of death, but she made it to the street, where the lights of passing cars flickered in the distance. Suddenly, Yemi collapsed on the side of the road, her body giving out completely. Her breath was shallow, her chest rising and falling in weak gasps. She lay there, motionless, her pale skin glowing under the streetlights. Moments later, a car approached. A man driving by noticed her crumpled figure on the side of the road and immediately pulled over. He rushed out of the car, panic gripping him as he knelt beside her. She looked as if she had been through something terrible, her skin cold and lifeless, but he could feel a faint pulse. Without hesitation, he scooped her up and placed her in the back seat of his car, speeding off toward the nearest hospital. When they arrived at the hospital, the nurses and doctors couldn't believe their eyes. They recognized her instantly. She had died in their hospital some days ago, and yet here she was, alive, barely clinging to life, but undeniably alive. The doctors rushed her into the emergency room, hooking her up to machines and running tests to confirm what their eyes were telling them. How could someone who had been declared dead show up at the hospital, breathing and alive? Hours passed as the doctors worked to stabilize Yemi. When she finally woke up, her eyes fluttering open in a daze, the room was filled with tension. Her heartbeat was steady now, but her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She blinked, trying to focus, her memories slowly coming back to her in fragments. Then it all rushed back. Obo. She remembered being at the morgue, feeling trapped in her own body as he lay next to her. She remembered the cold touch of his hands and the sound of his voice. Her heart raced as she struggled to sit up, her mind spinning. She had to tell someone what had happened. The doctors surrounded her, asking questions, trying to understand what had brought her back from the dead. But Yemi couldn't focus on that. Her voice trembled as she began to speak, telling them everything she remembered. Every detail of what Obo had done, every chilling moment in the morgue. The doctors were stunned. This was beyond anything they had ever encountered. Yemi had been declared dead, and yet here she was, telling them about her experience in the morgue, about a man who had done unspeakable things to her body. They knew they had to act fast. The police were called immediately. While Yemi rested in the hospital, recovering from her ordeal, the police set out to find Obo. Armed with the details Yemi had provided, they moved quickly, knowing that they needed to catch him before he had a chance to flee. Back at Obo's house, he sat in a state of panic. After searching the morgue and finding Yemi's body missing, he had rushed home, his mind swirling with fear and confusion. He couldn't understand how she had disappeared, and now he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just as he was packing a bag, ready to flee, a loud knock came at the door. His heart skipped a beat. He froze, his hand hovering over the bag. The knock came again, this time louder, more forceful. Obo knew what was coming. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach. Slowly, he walked to the door, his hands trembling as he opened it. Standing there were two police officers, their expressions cold and stern. Without a word, they stepped inside, pushing past Obo as they told him he was under arrest. Obo didn't resist. He couldn't. His mind was too overwhelmed by everything that had happened. As the officers cuffed his hands behind his back and led him out of the house, he glanced around, trying to make sense of it all. How had it come to this? How had Yemi, dead and cold just hours ago, come back? As they drove him to the station, Obo's mind raced with a mixture of disbelief and fear. He had spent years hiding his dark secret, and now, in the most unimaginable way, it had all come crashing down. At the police station, Obo sat nervously in a small room. His hands were cuffed, and he felt a mix of fear and confusion. Two officers sat across from him, ready to question him. One officer asked, "Obo, did you only interact with Yemi, or have you done this before?" Obo's heart raced. He decided to lie. "Yes, Yemi was the only one. I'm really sorry. It was a mistake. Please forgive me." The officers exchanged looks. Another officer said, "It's up to Yemi and her family to decide what happens next. They will decide if you will face court charges or not." Obo's hope for a lighter sentence faded. His future was now in Yemi's hands. He had to wait and see what they would decide. A few days later, Yemi was discharged from the hospital. The news of her miraculous return from the dead had spread, and her family threw a grand party to celebrate her recovery. The atmosphere was filled with joy and relief as friends and relatives gathered to welcome Yemi back. After the party, Yemi and her father sat together in a quiet part of their home. Yemi's father, a kind man with thoughtful eyes, looked at her with concern. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," Yemi began. Her voice was calm but filled with emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about Obo." Her father raised an eyebrow. "What about him?" Yemi took a deep breath. "If it weren't for Obo, I wouldn't be alive today. I know it's hard to understand, but he did something terrible because he was lost. I believe we should go to the police and ask them to release him." Her father was so surprised. "You want to forgive him after what he did to you?" Yemi nodded. "Yes. I know it's difficult, but I believe he needs help more than punishment. If we ask the police to let him go, maybe he can change his life." Her father pondered her words. He understood the pain Yemi had suffered and the miraculous nature of her recovery. Though it was a lot to consider, he could see the sincerity in Yemi's eyes. After a moment of thought, he agreed to support her decision. The next day, Yemi's father contacted the police, explaining Yemi's wishes. He asked them to release Obo from custody, emphasizing that Yemi had forgiven him and wanted to help him rather than see him punished. The police were surprised by the request, but respected Yemi's decision. They released Obo from custody, and he was soon on his way back to Yemi's home. When Obo arrived at Yemi's house, he was filled with a mix of dread and hope. He approached the door, his heart racing. Yemi and her father were waiting for him, and as he stepped inside, he could see the kindness in their eyes. "Yemi," Obo said, his voice trembling, "I'm so sorry for everything I've done. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was lost, and I've realized how wrong I was." Yemi looked at him calmly. "I forgive you, Obo. I understand that you were struggling, and I hope that you can find a way to change your life. It's not just about the past, it's about what you do from now on." Obo felt a wave of relief wash over him. The guilt and fear that had weighed on him were lifted. He thanked Yemi and her father for their mercy, promising that he would seek help and try to change his life. The extraordinary events of the past weeks had changed everything for Obo. As he walked away from Yemi's home, he vowed to honor the second chance he had been given by working to change his life for the better. Kofi's nights were filled with terror. Ever since Yemi's miraculous return, he had been haunted by restless dreams of ghostly figures. Each night, the shadows seemed to come alive, whispering and reaching out to him. The ghostly visions tormented him, and he could no longer sleep peacefully. Exhausted and desperate, Kofi knew he had to do something. He decided to go to Obo's house, hoping to talk to him about their dark past. Kofi believed that confessing might bring him some relief. As he walked to Obo's home, his mind raced with fear and guilt. When Kofi arrived, he found Obo sitting in his living room. "Obo," Kofi said urgently, "I can't take it anymore. I need to confess everything we did. I can't keep these nightmares to myself." Obo, who had just settled back into his life after being released, was startled by Kofi's plea. He was afraid that their secrets would come out and that they would face serious consequences. "No, Kofi," he said firmly. "You can't confess. I told the police Yemi was the only one. If you confess, they'll arrest us both. We'll be locked away forever." Kofi was resolute. "I can't live with this anymore. I need to tell the truth." Seeing Kofi's determination, Obo panicked. He could not afford to let their secret be exposed. As Kofi turned to leave, Obo grabbed a heavy stick from the corner of the room. Without warning, he swung it at Kofi. The stick struck Kofi on the head, and he collapsed unconscious on the floor. Obo looked at Kofi's motionless body and thought he was dead. A wave of panic hit him, but he quickly decided he needed to act. He dragged Kofi's body outside and left it by the roadside, hoping no one would find him. Luckily, a passerby saw Kofi lying on the road and quickly called for help. An ambulance arrived and rushed Kofi to the hospital. There, doctors worked to stabilize him, and after he regained consciousness, he was questioned about what had happened. Still shaken, Kofi told the doctors everything. He confessed to them about the strange and horrific things he and Obo had done with the corpses at the morgue. The doctors were stunned by the revelation and immediately called the police. The police arrived at the hospital and took Kofi's statement. They soon tracked down Obo, who was at home, trying to act as if nothing had happened. The police arrested Obo, and the two men were taken into custody. At their trial, both Obo and Kofi were charged with grave offenses. Their shocking actions had been revealed, and the court found them guilty. They were sentenced to 30 years in prison. Their once hidden life of horror was now public knowledge, and they had to face the consequences of their actions. As they were led away to start their long prison sentences, Obo and Kofi had to confront the reality of their crimes. As Obo and Kofi began their long prison sentences, the gravity of their actions weighed heavily on them. Each day in prison was a reminder of their terrible choices and the suffering they had caused. In the end, their story serves as a powerful reminder to live with integrity and respect for others. The choices we make in moments of weakness can define our lives and impact those around us in ways we might never fully understand. It is crucial to confront our desires with honesty and to seek help when we are overwhelmed, rather than letting them lead us down a path of irreversible harm. Obo and Kofi's tale is a somber reminder that true freedom comes from within, through accountability, remorse, and the genuine effort to change. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.